Hello, I'm James Henry, and this is The Message.
The Message.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you. If you were here last week, you know I wasn't here last week. Lest you think I was just out lollygagging about, which maybe I was a little bit last Sunday. I was off with some of our folks from St. James on a team to Appalachian Service Project down in Mitchell County, North Carolina, which is right on the Tennessee border in the mountains. It was beautiful, beautiful country. The people we met there were beautiful. And somehow, this is my third year going on Appalachian Service Project, and somehow our coordinator for the whole trip was crazy enough to believe I could be a team leader, which meant that my week was walking around making sure everybody else was working and troubleshooting when there were problems. And while I have some wicked cutting, nailing, drilling skills, I'm not sure that team leading is the key thing for me. But I learned some great lessons that you should not cut your hand off. I didn't learn them the hard way because no one's hand was cut off. We brought them all back safely and it was good. And so I am kind of transitioning back in. I spent about 10 hours on the road yesterday from Mitchell County, North Carolina, driving back here. And so it's good to be back. But if I seem just a little not firing on all pistons, I've only had 2 cups of coffee today instead of my normal 4. And of course, spending the week troubleshooting was perfect because I came back and the air conditioning wasn't working. So I spent my first 2 hours in the building troubleshooting the air conditioning. So it's kind of exciting. It just makes life interesting when things don't go as expected and you have to transition from one thing to the next thing. So let me read to you. You're going to be making another transition today. I printed the printed update with my intended scripture lesson that I fought with all week long during my quiet time before we would go to work on the site. It never said what I thought it had said to me when I first put it into the series on transitions. This is the last of the transition series. So since it didn't work, I had been thinking all week long and meditating every day on this resurrection story, Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. It's an interesting story about the resurrection of Jesus, but in it I find some interesting pointers about transitions. So rather than force everything to fit into Ephesians chapter, whatever it says in there, 3:14 through 21, we're going to look at Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. And I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they could go and anoint Jesus' dead body. Very early in the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they came to the tomb. They were saying to each other, "Who's going to roll away the stone when we get to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw the stone had been rolled away, and it was a very large stone. Going into the tomb, they saw a young man in white robes seated at the right side, and they were startled. But he said to them, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He isn't here. Look, here's the place where they laid him. Go tell his disciples, especially Peter, that he is going ahead of you into Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you." Overcome with terror and dread, they fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. You know, as I meditated on this passage this week, it became clear to me that this is a wonderful transition piece. It's transition piece because, of course, for us, we know the resurrection story. Jesus is alive, yay, he's among us right now. And that is pretty exciting news. That's very good news for us. But for the early disciples going, and for these 3 women, Mary, and Salome, who were headed to the tomb, Jesus was dead. Their whole movement was over. Everything they knew was gone, done, different. It was a whole new future ahead, and it did not include Jesus. So for them, this kind of transition, this kind of rough break, 2 weeks ago, everything's fantastic, great, yay, it's wonderful. we're going up to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. We head up there. We get to Jerusalem. We teach, Jesus is teaching in the temple. People by the hundreds are coming to hear what he has to say. They're listening to him. The movement is growing. Maybe this is going to be the time when God is really sending a Messiah to set us free. It's going to happen. It's going to happen now. And then suddenly in a rush, in a whirlwind, Thursday afternoon, Thursday, Jesus calls everybody together for the Passover meal. They get together, they have a meal together, and by the next morning he's been arrested, brutally beaten, and now he's marching up the hill. He's been hung on a cross. He's dead. What happened? And isn't that the way sometimes in our lives transition happens? We don't know when it's coming. We can't know what to expect. We think everything is going along peachy keen, perfect for us. And something happens. In this case, something really big. But lest you be deeply concerned from this story, obviously the church still exists, 2,000 years later, roughly, and we're here today. How did that happen? How did that happen? Did Jesus have a plan for his transition? Did he have a plan for what could happen? The answer is clearly yes. He has a plan for us, and a plan, kind of a direction for us to move into, a direction which carries us through those challenging transitions. So go back to the story for a moment. Jesus is dead. We know he's dead. We're absolutely sure he's dead. We're going together to the tomb. Why? Because he died so late in the day, right before the Sabbath, we didn't get a chance to cover him. We didn't get a chance to put all the right stuff on him, to anoint him, to cover him up. So we're going early the first day of the week, the first possible moment we can go, we're going down to anoint his body and take care of it. The women, Mary, and Salome. We're headed down there with a plan. The plan to anoint Jesus. But we're not sure, we didn't think the plan completely through. This is another thing about transitions that's clear here. The plan is we're going to go anoint Jesus, but there's a great big rock in front of there and it's way too big for us to move. But we'll get there and we'll figure something out. You notice the flexibility of Mary, and Salome as they approach the transitional period, the challenge in their lives. The unexpected happens, but they're going to kind of roll with the punches. They'll figure something out when they get to the next step. So they get there, and the next step's already taken care of. The stone's gone. It's rolled away. And, oh, good, we can get right in there. I don't know how we're going to close it back up, but it got rolled away. I'm sure it will get rolled back in front as soon as the time comes, whenever that's right. So, get our stuff together. The three of us, Mary, and Salome, are going to head into the tomb. There is no dead body. It was not part of our plan either. There's nobody laying there. Instead, there's this dude in white sitting at one side, off to the right. Apparently, we guess that he's an angel. It doesn't say. It says a guy in white. We assume that he's an angel, and the reason we assume that he's an angel, because the first thing he has to say is the same thing that angels have to say every time they make their first appearance in the Bible. Don't be afraid. You know, we have those pretty angels that we put on trees at Christmas time. There's nothing to be afraid of those things. Whatever angels look like, they don't look like happy little, chiffon-covered folks floating around with halos glowing. Whatever angels look like, they must be really scary. Because the first time you see them, boom, the first thing they have to say to you, don't be afraid. Don't be alarmed in this case. So that's what he says, don't be alarmed. Jesus isn't here. He is raised. He's gone ahead of you to the Galilee. You'll see him there, and he'll tell you what to do. He's gone ahead of you. He's laid the groundwork. He's wherever you go. You know, one of the challenging things about being a follower of Jesus, I think, in our world today is we think it's our job, and it is, to share the good news of Jesus. But we assume that Jesus isn't everywhere, that somehow he's on our shoulder. You know, you've seen those kinds of cool cartoons where you've got the really good guy on one shoulder and the really bad guy on the other shoulder. Well, we imagine we're carrying Jesus with us, and we've got him. And we're going to go somewhere where they don't have him and give him to him. Well, Jesus is already ahead of us. This story is about how Jesus is already laying the groundwork ahead of us for any transition we make in life, for any challenge we face. Jesus is already there ahead of us. This week that we went to Appalachian Service Project, we imagine when we go on these trips, when we're going to do mission work, we're going to rebuild a house, going to fix a house, finish up a house, put siding on a house. I learned how to do that this week. Real quick lesson to put the siding on. But we imagine we're bringing Jesus with us and that we're going to be some kind of massive blessing to the person we meet. And the truth is, we may be. We may be a blessing. But we have to realize Jesus is already there. We're going to discover Jesus. I worked with a lady today, this past week, whose house, she told us, if we hadn't come and fixed her house over the last 7 weeks, ASP, Appalachian Service Project, has been working on her house since the beginning. This was the 7th week, the last week of Appalachian Service Project this summer, and the first week was 7 weeks ago. And so they worked for 7 weeks on her house. She told us that if no one had come to work on her house, she was going to have to move in with her son who lives in Charlotte and leave her beautiful mountain. And when I say beautiful mountain, I mean beautiful mountain. You go up and sit on her front porch, just past the trees on the other side of the road in front of her house, you could hear the creek river rolling by. You could hear the water constantly. It was just constantly rolling by. She had a special affinity for butterflies, and apparently they had a special affinity for her, because if we saw one butterfly every day, we saw 50 or 100 of them of various kinds land on various plants she had planted for just that purpose in her. So if we had not come, and the we meaning all of the teens before us and us, she was going to have to move out of her house because in the wintertime she just couldn't heat it. You know, it was too cold last winter. So part of the challenge of facing the transitions of life is not knowing what lies ahead and the uncertainty of expectation. But you know what? Jesus was already there on that front porch with Miss Sheila. Because, in fact, by the end of the week, all of us on the team, there were 6 of us, including me, plus all the staff that worked for Appalachian Service Project were like, it would be really great if we could get a pocket Miss Sheila to carry around with us. Because instead of, we think of people when they don't have quite as much as we do sometimes as, in a different place than us. Well, they are. Miss Sheila was thankful for everything that she had. It wasn't that she needed a faster computer or a bigger house. She was thankful for all that she had. If Miss Sheila thanked me once, she thanked me 10 times a day for the work we were doing on her house. She was filled with grace. She told us about how God had worked in her life and that we were sent by God to help her out. She missed out on the point. She was sent by God to speak to us. We met Jesus on the front porch of a house in Mitchell County, North Carolina. Jesus was already ahead of us, had already gone before us into Mitchell County. So it's kind of arrogant when we think we carry Jesus like somebody else doesn't already know him somewhere else. Different situation, different place. But Jesus is already there, smoothing out the transitions. Now, I'll tell you, going on a mission trip is always an interesting thing. This is my 3rd year going on Appalachian Service Project. Every school we've stayed in has been different. Every floor is made of something, but generally, if you've ever been in a school, an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, it's a pretty hard floor. Air mattress, low to the ground. There was a time low to the ground was, there was no such thing as low to the ground to me. At this point in my life, low to the ground this is low to the ground. Get me down this far, I might not get back up. Low to the ground. We were sleeping on the floor. I was sleeping on an air mattress that I tried to keep blown up just to the right amount, but I don't have, you can't take along, although somebody did, brought a sleep number bed. He had a sleep number bed on the floor, and he could just make it, press a little button on it, as hard or as soft as he wanted. But most of us going on mission, don't have one of those. So I have an air mattress. It's noisy at night. You're sleeping in the room with about 10 other guys, some of whom snore at night, some of whom roll over and make noises at night, some of whom get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and they're not quiet about it, kick 6 things, including you maybe while they're going. So you get used to the fact that, you're going to be working hard every day, and maybe at night you might get 2 or 3 hours of sleep if you're lucky. Now, for people with insomnia, I'm really sorry for you, but I'm used to getting, more than 2 or 3 straight hours of sleep. I woke up every morning, for some reason, at 2:30 2:29, 2:31, 2:32. I can't tell you what's amazing about that time. I looked around me, no one was moving. It wasn't that. I would go to bed at like 10:15, 10:30. That was when lights out was at 11 o'clock, but James didn't always make it to lights out. My lights went out much sooner than that. And then I would wake up at 2:30. I would go back to sleep, but then I would be concerned I'd miss something. So I'd wake up at 4:30, 4:45, 5 o'clock. And usually by 5:30 I said, I'm just getting up and going and praying. That's, I have my watch. My Fitbit will wake me up at any time, will vibrate quietly not to wake anyone up. So at 5:50 it was set. By 5:50 every morning I was long out of bed, drinking 2 cups of coffee and praying. It's all these transitions in life. And so I go from my comfortable bed next to my wife with a fan and an air conditioning blowing to a room where 12 different guys have to agree on the temperature in the room. One person would come in and dial the window air unit all the way down as cold as it would go. Come in there, you could have hung meat in there. In fact, I think you might have been able to freeze ice cream in that room at some points. Then somebody else would come in and turn it all the way back around the other room. So you come in, it would be humid, hot, and gross. There didn't seem to be a middle ground. But see, these are the little things in life that you have to roll with those kinds of transitions. They happen all the time. And today's story is about a big transition. The leader of our movement, the very one that calls us together in this place, is gone. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to live? Well, the best we can do for him, he certainly was a good guy. We'll go and embalm his body. But how are we going to get in there? Halfway there, we get there. How are we going to get in? Stone's gone, taken care of. Jesus is gone, though. But there's a dude in white who's scary. Don't be afraid. Jesus is ahead of you. Jesus has already laid the foundation. He's gone. You will find him if you just go out and look for him. We established on the first week of this series 4 weeks ago that transitions are tough. Most people don't like change. I don't like change. I like things to stay the same. I like them neat. But nothing stays the same. Everything changes. You know what it's called when everything stops? Death. When you stop, you're dead. It's over. When your physical body starts moving. So change is constant. My body is changing right in front of you at this very moment. If you had seen me when I came home last night, my daughter got up this morning before I shaved and she said, "Who are you?" Because one of the things that was not convenient for me to do while I was away was shave. So I had this, and my beard grows in all white. My hair is salt and pepper on top, but white. So I look like 20 or 30 or 50 years older when I have beard on my face. So I transitioned away from sleeping in a more comfortable place to sleeping on the floor, getting up every morning with strangers, snoring and making noise all around me, hanging out at breakfast, not with just my wife across the table from me, but another 100 strangers all around me from other teams all over the country, Wisconsin, Maryland. They were all there doing work on houses during that time. I transitioned into doing something I don't do on a regular basis. If you're a contractor, you know that you get up every morning, you're going to go fix somebody's house, you're going to troubleshoot why can't we get that nail to stick where it is? Well, because apparently behind the vapor barrier that someone put up, there is no wood. So if there's no wood, there's nothing to nail into. So it's just going to fall off. So you're constantly troubleshooting things that you don't always know things about. Those transitions are what life is all about. The promise of this text today is, even when you plan, things aren't going to work out like you expect. And sometimes you're going to think of something halfway there that you should have thought of before you left, because maybe you would have taken Peter, Paul, Mary, no, that's a singing group. You would have taken some other folks with you to roll away the stone for you, but you didn't. But you find that things happen. Things you expect don't happen. And you have to learn to trust that the one thing that's true about this text is that Jesus is always going before you. There is no place you'll go in life, even to the most heathen places, and I don't even know what those places are, but wherever they are, Jesus is already there. Jesus is already there waiting for you to discover him again on the front porch in Mitchell County, North Carolina, in the middle school, on the floor at night with people snoring around you, with strangers from Wisconsin. Hey, they were all Green Bay fans. 2 thumbs up. So across the table from me, strangers in conversations, surprises. You never know what's going to happen. Now let's be honest though. The way this text ends leaves us hanging just a little bit. Because the way that the Gospel of Mark originally ends is in verse 8. All those other additions on there about the appearance stories and things like that, that was all later added. This ends on verse 8, where it says that the women were terrified, they left the tomb, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell anybody what they discovered. We know that must not be true because there wouldn't be a Gospel of Mark if they didn't. But let's be honest about transitions. Usually it's the fear that paralyzes us and keeps us from doing what we know we need to do, what we think we need to do. Fear keeps us. Fear of the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Quite frankly, I don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. I'm hoping that a long nap is going to fit in there somewhere. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I'm hoping I'm going to go home from here and the air conditioner is going to work at my house, even though it doesn't work in here. I'm hoping the Dominion Power guy is going to come and fix the pole where the problem is for why the air conditioner doesn't work right now. But all of those things I can't control, and it scares me a little bit. Transitions change, difference from moment to moment scares us a little bit. Fear is a part of life. Now, what are we going to do with that fear? If Mark, we're left with the implication at the end of Mark, they didn't say anything, but if we think about it carefully, they must have, because there is a Gospel of Mark. You all know we're in the process of transitioning at St. James. We may or may not move to a new location if everything works out. It's looking like will. It's looking like maybe by the end of the year. We're in the process of moving and figuring those things out, and that's scary. People come and talk to me about it all the time, tell me, James, this scares me. Sometimes it makes people mad. Oftentimes when we get to the bottom of why they're mad because they're scared. They're scared of losing what matters to them. They're scared of what lies ahead because they don't know. And those are good things to be scared. That's part of how God wired you. When you see this saber-toothed tiger coming at you, you get scared and you respond. You go away. Fear of change, fear of things that are scary out there makes sense. But the story says, whether the women tell the story or not, and they must have because we have Mark, whether they tell the story or not, Jesus is ahead of us. Jesus is with us right now. Jesus is gathered with us in this space, in this room. Jesus was here when I came in this morning after having Jeff sent me an email last night to tell me the alarm was going off. Linda called me while I was on the drive back from the alarm was going off in the building. I told Linda exactly how to turn it off, only it doesn't turn off if it's a different alarm set than that. So I told her how to turn it off. She said I tried. It didn't go off. It didn't go off because it was on a whole different system. So everything changes. All of life is filled with challenges of moving forward and figuring out what's next. But Jesus has gone ahead of us. Jesus has laid the foundation for us. And Jesus will be there no matter what. On the front porch in Mitchell, North Carolina, Bakersville, in whatever space where we worship and pray. Next. The next time you go into Starbucks and you're sitting next to a stranger and they turn to you and start talking to you, or you turn to them and start talking to you, and it scares the living bejeebers out of you because you don't know that person. Josh would tell you, you could ask him, he's at the tech station right now, my son who went with me on this ASP, that there was a part of him that was hoping not to go on the ASP trip. He wanted to say no about going. He had never been on a mission trip before. He didn't know what this mission trip would hold. It was a little scary to him. It was a little uncertain. Little did he know, Jesus had gone ahead of him and prepared the way. Within 12 hours of being at the site, of having arrived where there were only strangers, Josh knew everybody from Wisconsin. He knew half the people from Maryland. They were playing cards until after lights out at night. They were having conversations. They were kidding each other. He had made new friends he never expected. He met Miss Sheila, whose house we worked on. His life was transformed by that. He learned skills he didn't have before. He can now use a circular saw without cutting off his fingers, probably, because I trained him. So, and I still have all of mine, so pay attention if you're using a circular saw. And wear eye protection. That's always, wear eye protection. But the unknown frightened Josh. He told me. But by the second day, riding back from the job site in the truck with me, Josh was saying, well, next year is a definite. I'm going. I don't know where we're going to go or what we're going to do, but one experience of this transformed me so much. Have you experienced Jesus in your life? Do you trust Jesus to be with you in the worst times and the best? And if you do, can you trust that whatever lies ahead, Jesus is already there waiting for you? And He will carry you through the transition. This story is a story of faith. The resurrection story is about, in spite of our fear, in spite of things changing on us unexpectedly, Jesus will always be ahead of us. Jesus will always be with us. Jesus will always be behind us and above us and below us and all around us, preparing a way for us to do what He's calling us to do. Don't be discouraged by the transitions and changes in your life, but trust that Jesus goes ahead of you. Trust that He'll be with you.